Hey guys, tonight we dive headfirst into a place you probably try to avoid. Fear, not the flashy kind that makes your heart race when something jumps out of nowhere, but the quiet, persistent kind that nestles right behind your ribs, tightening with every breath. It's the slow, creeping hitch you catch in your chest when you're alone, the silent echo that whispers, you're on your own, ready to meet the parts of yourself you usually hide. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Oh, and hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see who's breathing with me right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You notice it first as a flicker, a shiver in your breath that you can't quite explain. It's that tiny pause between inhale and exhale, a hesitation that feels like a warning. Like when you're about to step into a dark room, but it's not the darkness itself. It's the silence, the emptiness that unsettles you. Autophobia, they call it. The fear of being alone. But it's not just loneliness. It's something more primal, deeper, an almost physical dread that wraps itself around your ribs and makes each breath a challenge. Science tells us this fear might be wired into your survival instinct. Humans evolved as social creatures. Being alone once meant being vulnerable to predators, so your brain still reacts, even if the predator now is just silence. Psychologists still debate whether autophobia is a discrete disorder or a symptom of broader anxiety issues. For you, though, it feels all too real. The breath is simple. Constant rhythm becomes your anchor and your tormentor. Sometimes it's shallow and quick, like the nervous flutter of a hummingbird's wings. Other times, it's a heavy weight pressing down, making you feel like you're suffocating in a room full of invisible walls. You try to catch it, control it, but the more you fight, the more elusive it becomes. Oddly, some cultures have rituals to chase away this solitude-induced fear. In parts of Japan, for example, there's a superstition that whispering to the shadows can confuse the spirits of loneliness. Silly, maybe, but desperate times often breed strange remedies. You might find yourself talking to yourself, pacing in circles, or repeating small actions that feel utterly ridiculous if you really think about them. Yet somehow, they ease the breath's panic, even just a little. You recall how, as a kid, your breath would hitch when left alone in a quiet room, the empty house suddenly feeling enormous and threatening. Maybe it was your parents working late, or a forgotten babysitter who seemed more like a stranger. That breath hiccup, an involuntary gasp of your body trying to scream for connection, echoes now in adult moments, when the silence creeps in. Remember the soft background hum you just turned on, that steady, soothing noise. It's a small rebellion against the silence, a way to fill the empty space so your breath doesn't have to shout its fear all alone. Here's a weird tidbit. Some people develop a fear of specific silence types, like silentiophobia, the fear of absolute silence, which might sound like a fancy phobia name to collect on a trivia quiz. But it's a real thing for some. Their breath becomes frantic, not just because of being alone, but because the silence itself feels like a vacuum sucking away their very presence. Your body remembers. The breath's first shiver is a ghost of those early, quiet moments when fear crept in, unnoticed. Historians still argue whether this deep-seated dread of isolation helped early humans survive, or was just an unfortunate side effect of our social evolution. So here you are now, breath caught between past and present, trying to hold on to something solid, when all you feel is the invisible grip of fear tightening inside. The breath lingers thin, trembling, and suddenly you're back in that old house. The one with the creaky floors and drafty windows that whistle just so. The walls don't just hold up the roof, they cradle the echoes of a younger you, the version who learned early that sometimes love feels like absence. Attachment issues don't just pop up out of nowhere. They root themselves in the quiet spaces where you waited, often alone, for someone to notice you. Maybe your parents were there, but emotionally distant. Or maybe they left and came back like a fading shadow. You know, the science. John Bowlby, the pioneer of attachment theory, showed that children develop emotional bonds based on how reliably their caregivers respond. Those early patterns set the stage for how you breathe through relationships now, whether you cling tightly or push away before anyone can leave. Psychologists still debate whether these attachment styles are fixed or fluid over a lifetime. But for you, the breath tightens either way when trust feels fragile. You can almost feel the air growing heavier as you walk through those shadowed halls of memory. The silence presses against your ears, broken only by your shallow, uneven breath. Did you ever stretch out your small hand, hoping for a warm touch that never came? Did the quiet grow louder the longer you waited? It's here, in these forgotten moments, that the roots of your fear take hold. Strangely, some people develop what's called attachment rituals. Small, repeated actions meant to reassure themselves when connection feels uncertain, like tapping a finger 3 times, or always arranging objects just so. These little habits might seem quirky or irrational, but they're your brain's attempt to create order in emotional chaos, a way to steady your breath when everything else feels unsteady. You recall the way your breath used to catch when your caregiver left the room, even for a moment. That tiny separation was like a crack in your world. Separation anxiety isn't just a childhood phase. It lingers, masquerading as panic when your phone dies, or when someone doesn't answer a text fast enough. The same instinct that once kept you safe now traps you in loops of worry. Historians still argue whether early human children evolved these anxieties as survival mechanisms, or if they're byproducts of our increasingly complex social structures. Either way, your breath quickens at the thought of abandonment, a biological echo from millions of years ago. Now tangled with your personal history, you might find yourself replaying conversations or scanning faces for signs of withdrawal, each breath shallow with tension. Or maybe you avoid closeness altogether, fearing the eventual hurt. It's a delicate dance, and your breath is the rhythm, sometimes staccato with panic, sometimes slow and tentative, always searching. Here's a fun fringe fact. In some cultures, people wear love tokens or carry charms believed to protect against emotional loss, like a rabbit's foot for relationships. Sounds a little out there, but when your breath is caught in fear's grip, any talisman feels like a lifeline. So, you tread carefully through those shadowed rooms of longing, your breath the only sound you trust, the steady pulse beneath the ache of waiting. You are not alone in this, even if it feels that way. The echoes of your early attachments are writing the script your heart still reads every day. The breath becomes a fragile thread as you step into the empty spaces, the quiet cafes after closing, the once busy park benches now deserted. Separation anxiety drapes over these places like a heavy cloak, making each step feel both necessary and terrifying. It's not just leaving people behind. It's the ache of distance itself, the unbearable stretch between you and what feels like safety. Your breath catches, shallow and quick, as the silence swells around you, filling every crack and crevice. Scientists explain that separation anxiety arises from the deep need for secure connection, a need wired into the brain's limbic system, which governs emotions and survival instincts. This anxiety isn't just a childhood quirk. Adults experience it too, sometimes triggered by a text left unanswered or the sight of someone leaving a room without looking back. Psychologists still debate whether separation anxiety in adults is a continuation of childhood trauma or a distinct condition. But its grip on your breath is undeniable. You remember the way your chest would tighten as your mother's car disappeared down the street, the fading sound of her engine echoing like a ticking clock, counting down to loneliness. The world shrank then, a bubble of fear tightening with every passing second. Breath hitched in silent panic. That breath shallow. Urgent became a lifeline and a prison. Oddly, some people develop elaborate separation rituals to stave off this panic, calling a loved one repeatedly, arranging pillows just so, or even compulsively checking locks. These actions may seem irrational, but they're desperate attempts to restore control when your breath is hostage to anxiety's cruel hold. The creaking of a loose floorboard, the whisper of wind through cracked windows. All these sounds become magnified in your solitude. The breath, normally steady and unnoticed, now flutters like a trapped bird, a nervous rhythm echoing your inner alarm. Anthropologists still argue whether these rituals stem from ancient human behaviors meant to reassure the group or are purely cultural constructs. Either way, they underscore how intimately breath and fear are intertwined in your experience. Your heart pounds as you glance over your shoulder, half expecting to see someone following or waiting to leave you behind. The breath is both anchor and alarm bell, reminding you that separation isn't just physical, it's a wound you carry inside. In a quirky twist, some people with severe separation anxiety are said to develop object attachment, forming intense bonds with inanimate things like blankets or stuffed animals, objects that breathe none of the betrayal humans sometimes do. It's a strange comfort. But in your breath, you understand the logic anything to fill the silence. So here you are, navigating shadowed rooms and empty chairs, your breath a soft echo of the fear that clings to distance and absence. The world may be quiet, but inside, your lungs whisper stories you're still learning to listen to. The breath tightens again, a slow, deliberate squeeze beneath your ribs. Fear of abandonment coils deep here, an invisible serpent wrapped around your heart, squeezing every drop of calm from your lungs. You try to steady the rhythm, to coax the air in gently, but it fights back, jerking in quick. Shallow bursts like a trapped bird. The idea that someone might leave you, that the people who matter most might disappear, sends your breath into a spiral of panic before your mind can even catch up. This fear isn't just emotional, it's biochemical. When the brain perceives abandonment, it triggers the same pathways as physical pain, flooding your system with stress hormones that rattle your breath and make your chest feel like it's being crushed. Psychologists still debate whether fear of abandonment is a distinct disorder or a symptom woven through several anxiety and personality conditions. But for you, it's a lived reality with every inhale and exhale. Your mind drifts back to the moments you felt this most acutely. Maybe the sudden silence after a harsh word, or the slow retreat of a friend's presence until the phone call stopped. The breath constricts just thinking about it. It's like your body knows before your mind does, gearing up for loss with every trembling breath. You might have developed protective habits, always checking if your messages were read, rehearsing conversations to avoid conflict, or mirroring others' moods to stay safe. Some call these behaviors abandonment, anxiety rituals. And while they might sound obsessive, they're really your breath's desperate attempts to hold on to connection when the risk of loss feels unbearable. Here's a curious cultural footnote. In medieval Europe, knights would carry tokens from loved ones, lockets or handkerchiefs as talismans against loneliness during long absences, a sort of ancient breath control charm, grounding them in love while miles apart. Strange how across time and place, breath and connection intertwine so tightly. Your chest aches now, tight and raw, as the breath struggles to find room. You want to scream, but your voice catches like your breath, silenced by fear's invisible grip. You try to remind yourself that this feeling isn't a prophecy, but the serpent coils tighter, whispering old lies, you know? Too well. Psychologists still debate whether abandonment fear is learned through early trauma or partly inherited through genetics. But your breath doesn't care about theories. It reacts, visceral and urgent, as if the world itself might crumble without the people you love. In a strange irony, some people with intense fear of abandonment also develop avoidance behaviors, pushing others away before they can be left. It's a paradox your breath knows well, a push and pull, a dance of closeness and distance that leaves your lungs gasping for relief. So here you breathe, caught in the invisible coil, each inhale a fragile promise to keep trying. Even when fear threatens to steal the air from your lungs, the breath shifts quicker now, uneven, like a secret rhythm. Only, tied to the small rituals you perform when fear claws at your edges. You might not notice these odd habits, but they quietly echo your brain's frantic attempt to make sense of the chaos. Maybe it's tapping your fingers in a specific pattern, or repeatedly checking the door lock, or tracing invisible lines on your skin. These are the whispers beneath your breath, the tiny armor you don to keep autophobia and anxiety at bay. Mainstream psychology labels these behaviors as compulsions, or coping mechanisms. But the fringe gets even stranger. Some ancient tribes believed these repetitive acts could confuse or trap the spirits of fear itself, sort of like trapping your anxiety in an invisible cage. Sounds like something out of a fantasy novel, right? Yet, in the quiet moments when your breath is shallow and jittery, these rituals feel like lifelines. Remember how your breath faltered in Section 1, the first time fear touched you in solitude. These rituals are the body's whispered response, an attempt to control what feels uncontrollable. Sometimes they bring comfort, sometimes just a brief pause in the storm, a moment where breath steadies enough to hold on. There's an odd debate among scholars whether these rituals are purely learned behaviors or if they tap into some ancient, subconscious survival strategy. Maybe it's both. For you, it's the difference between gasping for air and catching a breath long enough to whisper, "I'm still here." Picture a small child quietly humming or twirling a favorite blanket. When scared, those are early versions of the same thing. You might have outgrown the blanket, but the need for ritual lives on, a silent echo of safety in the rhythm of breath. Your breath stutters as you recall times when these habits felt both ridiculous and necessary. The tension between rational thought and primal fear creates a strange dance in your chest, one your breath keeps score of in its uneven tempo. Sometimes, these rituals border on absurdity. Did you know some people believe wearing mismatched socks can ward off bad luck or emotional loss? It's a quirky fact, but when your breath is tight with fear, even the strangest superstition can feel like a shield. So, as you trace invisible lines or tap secret codes on your skin, know that your breath is learning to cope, even if the methods feel a little strange. The silent echoes of your fears don't always speak in words. Sometimes, they speak in rhythm, in breath, in habit. Your breath hangs in the balance now, caught between two opposing forces that pull you in opposite directions. Attachment isn't simple. It's a pendulum swinging wildly inside you. One moment you're desperate to cling, holding tight with breath held in silent prayer that this time they won't leave. The next, you push away, your lungs emptying sharp and quick, desperate for space from the suffocating closeness you fear will crush you. This oscillation becomes your emotional dance, breath the rhythm you can't quite control. Attachment theory names these swings as anxious avoidant conflict, where the need for connection battles with the fear of dependence. Psychologists still debate whether this push-pull is a stage to outgrow or a lifelong tension for some. But here, in your chest, it feels like a war zone with breath as the battlefield's soundtrack. You remember the moments you flung yourself towards someone heart-pounding, breath caught in your throat only to retreat the instant the distance closed. That sharp inhale when the fear of engulfment hit, and the rapid exhale as you pulled back, gasping for the air you thought closeness would steal. It's exhausting, this breath caught between yearning and fleeing. Some fringe theories suggest that this pendulum swing mirrors ancient human survival tactics: cling when safe, flee when threatened. Oddly poetic for something so gut-wrenching. And in your breath, you can hear the echoes of those primal strategies playing out in slow motion. Odd habits often accompany this tension: holding your breath during arguments, exhaling sharply when someone tries to get too close emotionally. Maybe you found yourself tiptoeing around conversations, trying to balance your desire to connect with your dread of being overwhelmed. Breath becomes your silent barometer, signaling when you're leaning too far one way or the other. That flutter in your chest, the sudden gasp, the shallow sigh, they're your body's way of shouting, too much, too little. There's a curious cultural practice in some indigenous groups where individuals use controlled breathing exercises to find emotional equilibrium, essentially training their breath to steady the emotional pendulum. You might have stumbled upon similar practices, even if you didn't name them at the time. So here you are, suspended in the rhythm of breath, caught in the dance of attachment's extremes. Your lungs remember the push and pull better than your mind sometimes, whispering truths you're only beginning to understand. Your breath slows, almost imperceptibly, like the softest shadow slipping across a sunlit room. But beneath that calm lies a storm, a deep, aching fear of being truly seen and then rejected. This fear threads through every thought, a silent echo that makes vulnerability feel like stepping off a cliff without a parachute. You want to reach out, but the breath catches too sharp, too exposed, and you retreat, wrapping yourself in invisible armor that makes connection both a necessity and a threat. Psychologists recognize this as the core of attachment wounds. The scars left when your early relationships taught you that closeness often meant pain or neglect. Your breath becomes a messenger here, tightening when you sense judgment, fluttering when you long for acceptance. Scholars still debate how much these wounds can heal or whether they become part of your emotional DNA. But your breath knows the truth in every moment of hesitation. You recall those times you tried to share your feelings, only to be met with silence or dismissal. The breath froze in your chest like a bird caught mid-flight, wings spread but grounded. That moment, suspended in air, is where fear settles deepest, weaving itself into your very breath. In some cultures, there's a belief that breath carries the soul's truth. When you hold your breath, you hold back your essence. It's a poetic idea that rings painfully true when you feel the urge to speak, but can't release the breath needed to do so. Strange but true, some people develop a breath phobia, a rare condition where the act of breathing itself triggers panic, an ironic twist in the story of fear, where the very thing that sustains life becomes a source of dread. You might not have this extreme, but you recognize the breath's double-edged sword, sustaining you while reminding you of your vulnerabilities. Your chest tightens again as you think about trust, the precarious dance of giving yourself over to someone else without knowing if you'll be caught or dropped. Your breath is the silent witness, the steady pulse beneath the uncertainty. In a strange twist, some ancient healing practices use breathwork to coax out buried fears, letting the breath carry away the weight little by little. It's a slow, tentative journey, but every exhale is a small act of courage. So here you breathe, the silent echo of your deepest fears mingling with the hope that one day your breath might flow freely again, carrying you toward connection instead of away. The breath falters, uneven, as the weight of loneliness presses down, folding around you like a dense fog. You remember how isolation feels, not just physical solitude, but the aching emotional distance that makes your chest tighten with each shallow inhale. It's an old friend and a cruel stranger, the space where fear of abandonment and autophobia collide, making the breath shallow, almost reluctant to fill your lungs fully. Neuroscientists tell us that loneliness activates the same neural pathways as physical pain, amplifying your breath's quickening rhythm as your brain signals danger. This shared circuitry means the breath isn't just responding to air hunger, but to a deep, primal alarm system wired for social survival. Psychologists still debate whether chronic loneliness shapes these pathways permanently, or if they can recalibrate with new experiences. But your breath carries the weight of that question every day. You recall those long nights when the quiet stretched endlessly, each breath echoing in empty rooms as you wrestled with the ache of being unseen. It's in these moments the breath becomes both a reminder of absence and a fragile thread holding you to yourself. An odd bit of trivia: some cultures perform breath-sharing rituals, believing that exchanging breaths forms unbreakable bonds. It's a fascinating counterpoint to your experience, where breath is often a solitary struggle, a silent cry for connection. Your breath tightens as memories flicker, text messages left unread, doors closing softly, promises whispered, then forgotten. The echo of these moments lodges in your lungs, making every inhale a tentative step through shadowed halls of trust and loss. Fringe science suggests that breathing patterns can reveal emotional states so accurately that some therapists use breath monitoring as a diagnostic tool for anxiety and attachment issues. It's a reminder that your breath isn't just a passive witness, it's an active player in your emotional story. In the quiet, your breath begins a slow rhythm, a tentative pulse that mirrors the flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this fog can lift, and your lungs can breathe freely again. So you hold on to that fragile rhythm, the silent echo of resilience beneath the weight of loneliness and fear. Your breath is a whisper now, barely audible, threading through the heavy silence of a room filled with unspoken fears. Fear of being abandoned has grown roots so deep they clutch at your ribs, making each inhale a negotiation between dread and hope. The shadow of leaving, whether real or imagined, hangs over you like a storm cloud, and your breath becomes the subtle weather vane, shifting with the slightest change in emotional wind. Science reveals that the brain's attachment circuits are deeply entwined with the amygdala, the seat of fear, which triggers your breath to become erratic when abandonment feels imminent. But psychologists still debate whether these reactions are a product of learned experiences or evolutionary survival instincts, leaving your breath caught in an ambiguous dance between past and present. You remember the little cracks, the missed calls, the sudden silences that grew into canyons of fear. Your breath sharpens, a startled bird fluttering against the cage of your chest. That breath, so fragile, holds the weight of every goodbye you never wanted, but always feared. There's a curious cultural anecdote about the breath of farewell. Some tribes believe that the final breath shared before a departure carries the soul's essence, a binding force to those left behind. For you, every separation feels like a fragment of that breath, lost and unreachable. The breath falters with the memory of a promise broken. A hand pulled away just as you reached for it. Your chest tightens, lungs constricting as the phantom of abandonment presses in. It's a biochemical cascade, a cocktail of cortisol and adrenaline that tightens your breath and sharpens your senses in a frantic attempt to hold on. A fringe fact: some people with severe fear of abandonment experience attachment, hallucinations, sensing voices or touches that soothe the panic, blurring the line between reality and the desperate need for connection. It's a stark reminder of how deeply breath and mind are entwined in your story. So, with every shallow inhale and trembling exhale, you trace the fragile line between hope and despair, your breath a silent testament to the battles waged in the quiet chambers of your heart. Your breath stutters again, this time like a flickering candle struggling against a draft, fragile yet defiant. You find yourself caught in the cyclical echo of past fears and present anxieties, like an endless loop where the shadow of abandonment circles back, tightening its grip each time you think you're free. That rhythmic flicker, this breath's dance with fear, becomes a familiar soundtrack, marking moments when connection feels just out of reach. Neurologists explain this as the brain's threat detection system. Misfiring memories of abandonment trigger overactive stress responses, making your breath quicken even when no immediate danger exists. This heightened vigilance, called hyperarousal, keeps you perpetually on edge, lungs shallow, pulse racing. Yet, psychologists still debate if hyperarousal is a protective adaptation or a maladaptive trap, leaving your breath caught in the limbo between safety and threat. You remember the tightness spreading in your chest during a recent conversation, the breath catching as you scanned for signs of rejection or withdrawal. It was a silent negotiation. Stay or flee, speak or shut down. Your breath answered before you could decide. Shallow and urgent. There's a quirky note here. Some ancient traditions believed that whispering to the breath itself could coax fear away, a secret prayer to the invisible rhythm that sustains life. While it sounds like folklore, you find moments when simply focusing on your breath offers a sliver of calm amid the storm. You may have noticed your breathing changes when you feel watched or judged, an unconscious signal that your nervous system is primed for potential loss. Breath, in this way, is your body's early warning system, whispering warnings you can't always hear consciously. A fringe fact: some studies suggest breath control techniques may influence the vagus nerve, the body's brake pedal for stress responses, offering a physical path to emotional regulation. You might already practice some form of this, even if only by accident, through deep sighs or slow exhales when panic creeps in. So, the flickering candle of your breath continues its dance, wavering between fear's cold draft and the warmth of tentative hope, a silent beacon in the long night of anxiety. Your breath dips low now, heavy and weighted, as if carrying the echoes of every unspoken word, every abandoned hope folded inside you like a folded note never sent. Fear of abandonment wraps itself around you again, not with sharp claws this time, but a quiet, persistent pressure that squeezes your lungs until each inhale feels like pushing through a dense fog. You want to scream, but the breath remains lodged somewhere between throat and chest, silent but screaming all the same. Psychologists call this chronic fear an attachment trauma, a shadow that lives beneath the surface and colors every interaction with a hue of mistrust. Your breath reflects this: a steady, low pulse, a reminder that fear doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simmers. Scientists still argue about the best way to heal this wound talk therapy. Somatic work, medication, but your breath knows healing isn't linear. It ebbs and flows, like waves against a shore. You think of moments when you tried to articulate this fear, but found your voice muffled. The breath faltered, as if the very act of speaking might shatter the fragile bridge to those you long to reach. It's a paradox. The more you try to hold on, the more the breath shrinks back, curling in on itself like a retreat. Here's a curious fact. Some cultures have used breath-holding contests as rites of passage, tests of endurance and courage. The irony isn't lost on you. Fear of abandonment makes you hold your breath in life's emotional contests, waiting for a breath of relief. Oddly, the breath you hold in fear mirrors the breath of those who meditate, seeking calm and presence. The difference lies in intention. One is a clutching, the other a release. You wonder if you might one day find your breath on the release side. Some fringe theories suggest unresolved attachment trauma may imprint on the body's cellular memory, meaning your breath carries not just your own fear, but ancestral echoes as well. It's a haunting thought, but it explains why sometimes fear feels both deeply personal and strangely universal. So your breath rests heavy, weighted with all this history, a silent witness to the battles you fight inside, and the quiet courage it takes to keep breathing anyway. Your breath hesitates now, like a fragile thread pulled taut across a canyon, ready to snap, yet holding on by sheer force of will. You sense the fear of separation whispering beneath every exhale, the sharp edge of distance slicing into the soft tissues of your heart. Each breath you take feels like a balancing act, a fragile truce between longing and loss, tethered to the hope that what's broken can somehow be mended. Attachment scientists tell us that separation anxiety activates the same neurochemical pathways as physical pain, flooding your system with oxytocin and cortisol in a confusing mix of comfort and distress. The breath mirrors this clash, sometimes slow and deep, other times tight and rapid. Still, debate persists on whether these reactions are evolutionary safety nets or maladaptive scars from past trauma, leaving you suspended in uncertainty with every breath you draw. You recall the last time you said goodbye, how your chest constricted, lungs shrinking, breath caught in your throat as if swallowed by the weight of impending absence. That breath lingers now, a ghostly echo that clings to your ribs. There's a curious custom in some cultures where families use synchronized breathing during moments of separation, believing it preserves connection across distance. It's a beautiful thought, contrasting with your experience of breath as a marker of loss rather than unity. Stranger still is the rare air hunger phenomenon, where the feeling of suffocating loneliness tricks the brain into demanding more oxygen. Even when plenty is available, your breath quickens in response, a desperate, unconscious plea for connection. You might find yourself holding your breath when someone important leaves the room, a small, reflexive gesture that speaks volumes about your internal struggle with separation. It's a silent scream carried by your lungs. In moments like these, your breath becomes both a fragile lifeline and a sharp reminder of what you fear to lose. Yet, within the tension, there's a whisper of resilience, breath's quiet promise that even in absence, life continues. So you breathe, suspended between presence and absence, each inhale a fragile bridge over the chasm of fear. Your breath wavers, caught in a fragile rhythm like a candle flickering in the wind. Fear of abandonment, tightening its grip just when you thought you'd found steady ground. It's that familiar tug in your chest, a silent echo that screams in the spaces between heartbeats, reminding you that connection can be both a lifeline and a trap. You inhale sharply, the breath sharp and sudden, as if bracing for impact, while the exhale slips away too quickly, a sigh lost in the rush of emotions you barely understand. Psychological studies reveal that fear of abandonment often stems from early attachment disruptions, where your nervous system learned to anticipate loss before it even happened. Your breath reflects this hypervigilance, a subconscious messenger signaling danger long before your mind catches on. Yet, therapists still debate how much this fear shapes adult relationships versus how much it can be rewritten through new experiences. You remember the moments when you clung desperately to someone's presence, your breath shallow and rapid, only to recoil in panic when closeness felt overwhelming. It's a paradox your lungs carry the simultaneous desire for and dread of intimacy. A quirky fact: some people with intense fear of abandonment develop a habit of breath catching, an involuntary pause in breathing triggered by emotional triggers, almost like a hiccup of the soul. It's bizarre, yet strangely fitting for the invisible battles fought in your chest. In some ancient cultures, breath was seen as the bond between souls. Losing breath meant losing connection. This metaphor isn't lost on you, as every shallow breath feels like a fragile thread holding your relationships together. You might notice that your breath tightens when you imagine being left behind, a physiological echo of emotional pain that prepares your body for loss. It's a dance your nervous system learned long ago, and one you can't quite stop. Still, within this fragile breath lies a seed of possibility, a hint that even fear, when faced softly, can transform from a silent echo into a whispered hope. Your breath quickens again, like the restless flutter of wings trapped inside your ribs, as you confront the tangled knots of fear that bind you. Each inhale feels both necessary and dangerous, a bridge between the safety of solitude and the risk of reaching out. The shadow of separation anxiety looms large, its silent echo, a constant hum beneath the surface, shaping how you breathe, how you live, how you love. Neuroscientists explain that separation anxiety lights up the brain's alarm circuits, flooding your system with stress hormones that make the breath shallow and erratic, preparing you to flee or fight. But psychologists still debate whether this reaction is a survival mechanism or a trauma imprint, making your breath a battlefield between instinct and experience. You recall the moments when leaving a loved one felt like stepping off a cliff, your breath hitching in your throat, chest tightening, heart pounding, an involuntary reaction that betrays how deeply this fear is wired into you. The rhythm of your breath becomes a silent metronome, counting down to the inevitable separation you dread. There's a peculiar ritual in some cultures where people share their last breath before parting, believing it carries a piece of the soul and maintains connection despite distance. It's a hauntingly beautiful contrast to the loneliness your breath often signals. You might notice that during times of separation, your body instinctively shifts your breathing, sometimes holding it, other times panting softly, as if trying to keep the connection alive through the air itself. It's a subtle but powerful expression of your internal struggle. Fringe science suggests that breath-focused therapies can help rewire these fear responses, training your nervous system to find calm in the storm of separation. Anxiety. Perhaps you've tried breathing exercises before, or maybe this idea sparks a new hope. So your breath flutters, hesitates, then steadies, a quiet rebellion against the shadows that seek to control it. Within the breath, you find both the weight of fear and the flicker of courage, a silent promise that connection, even when fragile, endures. Your breath deepens now, steadying like a slow, deliberate wave washing over a rocky shore, carrying away the restless echoes of fear, bit by bit. The shadow of abandonment no longer feels like an unyielding grip, but a softened presence still there. Yes, but no longer dictating the rhythm of your life or the cadence of your breath. You're learning to hold your breath less tightly, to let it flow with more ease, even if only in fleeting moments. Recent research in psychology points to the power of mindfulness and breath awareness in rewiring attachment fears, helping to cultivate resilience without erasing the past. It's a process of gentle transformation, where breath becomes not just a signal of fear, but a tool for healing. Still, Scholars debate the long-term effects and who benefits most, underscoring that every journey with fear is intensely personal and uniquely challenging. You think back to the beginning of this journey, those sharp, quick breaths of panic, the silent holding patterns, the fluttering hesitation, and you realize your breath now carries a quiet strength, a soft pulse of presence that wasn't there before, a quirky tidbit. In some cultures, breath is thought to carry memories, and breathing deeply can inhale wisdom from ancestors, a poetic idea that speaks to how your own breath connects past fears to future hopes. There's also the fringe practice of breath painting, where artists visualize fears and hopes with every breathstroke, turning invisible emotions into tangible art. It's an unusual metaphor for your own struggle, where the breath has become the brush and your mind the canvas. Your chest rises and falls with a steady cadence, the silent echo of fear transforming into a whisper of acceptance, a recognition that fear may always linger in some form, but it no longer defines you. Instead, your breath becomes a companion, a reminder of the delicate balance between holding on and letting go. So you breathe in this quiet space, carrying both your fears and your courage, moving forward with a breath that is no longer just survival, but a step toward living fully. The air around you softens. Your breath slows into a gentle tide that laps quietly at the edges of your consciousness. The fierce clutch of fear begins to ebb, replaced by a tender awareness of your own resilience, a whisper that despite the shadows, you remain whole, breathing. Present, inhale. Feel the fragile thread of connection weaving through your lungs, steadying your heart. Exhale. Release the tension, the silent echoes of abandonment that no longer hold dominion over you. This moment is neither an end nor a perfect resolution, but a passage, a slow turning of the tide, where fear's weight lightens, and your breath becomes a quiet promise of hope. It is in this softening that you find space to acknowledge your pain without being overwhelmed by it, to hold your fears gently while reaching toward healing. Remember, your breath carries the stories of all those silent moments, the tightness, the panic, the relief. Each inhalation is a testament to survival. Each exhale, a step toward acceptance. The journey is ongoing, and while fear may visit again, you have learned to welcome it without surrendering. Now, rest in this calm. Let your breath be the steady anchor. Amidst the shifting seas of emotion, feel the soft hum of life beneath your skin, the quiet echo of your own courage. End of script. Sweet dreams.